Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, I can't remember if it was on the podcast or someone who just randomly asking me which team might be kind of feisty this year or interesting. I said after week one that the Pats could be a little bit fun to watch this year. I completely take that back. I was wrong. This is me. I am sorry. I apologize. This is my mea culpa. That team was a bigger pile of trash than the Pacific, than the one floating in the Pacific.
Pile of trash.
Yeah. I cannot apologize enough. That team truly reprehensible tonight.
What team did I say could be interesting? I don't even remember.
It wasn't that one. I can tell you that.
Right. Fantastic. I am batting 1-0 against you on this particular question. Yeah. No, dude, the Pats were so bad. I mean, Jacoby Brissett, I've always kind of liked him as like a bridge quarterback / backup. He looked awful. And like, I know the Jets defense is good, right? But he looked awful. That was terrifying.
Well, they're not starting their rookie because they have no line. But right. If you play
and it got worse,
Brissett,
right? Because I mean, their left tackle like retired like yesterday or something, right? And well, not yesterday, but like their left tackle's gone, and so they're like, oh, we could start Vidarian Lowe, who, if you remember, was cut by the Vikings not too long ago. We could just start Vidarian Lowe. Oh, we can't do that. He's hurt. Okay, we'll start Caden Wallace, who we drafted to be a guard. It's rough goings over there on the offensive line with the Patriots.
This offensive line has a real interesting opportunity to be one of the worst in the not only in the NFL but in NFL history. This line is just
reminds me of the 2015 Vikings offensive line where they went through like there was a moment where it felt like not a single one of them playing was slated to start the season that year, right? Because you had like TJ Clemmings and whoever replaced Jake Long, I think. Like it was bad. Like you were running like Charlie Johnson or I think Charlie Johnson got hurt. Like Joe Berger was a backup and he was actually playing okay, right? But everyone else, that was a minefield.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
I remember stats that year where they would show, Dallas has had the same offensive line out there for all but one game, and so truly amazing. The Vikings have had this many variations on a line this year.
They had the most offensive line combinations, and it was like there was like a gap, right? It's like one of those charts where it's like you've got this bar chart of like the number of offensive, and then like the next one was like half as many. It was like Jesus Christ, dude, that is awful.
That the Pats are no good. The Pats made Rodgers look good. That's never a positive. So yeah, that is our discussion on the game. I wanted to start recording in the third quarter. This was just bad.
Yeah, I mostly resisted because I had some over-unders I wanted to hit, and I think I was like wrong on all of them. Like I had like an over on Garrett Wilson yards. I had an under on Tyler Conklin yards. I had an over on Breece Hall's combined yards, and they were so far ahead. They were like, we got to run the ball, but not with our running back. Why would we do that? Let's go with our third running back. It was just like, oh my God, dude.
If you're a degenerate enough to gamble on Thursday Night Football on an Aaron Rodgers New England game, and I say New England because the commercials last year were, this team versus Bill Belichick's New England Patriots. This year they didn't even have Bill Belichick. It was just Aaron Rodgers, the New England Patriots. No star, no quarterback, no receiver, not even a guard, not even a punter. Just the team itself was the draw, was the reason why you'd watch it. It was
bad.
It was bad. Well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. We have a game to preview. We have an interview that Arif conducted earlier today to preview the Texans game, so we'll go into that and the mailbag as well. But once again, thank you guys for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us out financially, you can do so a couple of different ways. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode, and for $3.50 a month, or a little less for the year-long subscription, you get access to bonus material, which a new episode will be coming out here real shortly. And then you get access to the Discord, all of that at Norse Code's Patreon page. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up any number of wonderful pieces of Norse Code merch. Hey, Christmas is coming, and we do have the wreath stuff all ready for you in case you need to terrify your loved ones or have the kids look sharp in baby onesies and in shirts and all that over at our merch store. Also, a quick announcement. We are looking at doing a Minneapolis live show. Well, Egan specifically, but we're looking at doing a Minneapolis live show and looking around the Chicago Bears Monday night game. So this is your first warning that this is something we are looking at doing. And
warning. We're threatening you with a live show.
Yes, we are threatening you with a live show, potentially, and threatening you with tickets to a football game. You should just be warned. This is something that could happen. So that is the plan right now. I feel confident in it because it doesn't involve going to Europe, which means I can probably do it. So I can't seem to pull off the other one, but we'll deal with that as the time comes. Again, thank you guys for listening. Let's get into the interview that Arif conducted earlier today with Texans expert Cody Stutes.
All right, I'm here with Cody Stutes, the owner of the Houston Football Substack. I remember we reached out to each other a little bit back when he started up his Substack. Hopefully, it's going really well. I like what I'm reading there. And also Cody Stutes on YouTube. How you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. And I mean, it's going great. And in large part, some of the advice that we tossed around on that phone call. So it's fantastic. Good Texans football to talk about. I'm sure good Vikings football to talk about for you guys. It's a fun start to the 2024 season.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Having two teams with a winning record, I feel like pretty recent innovation for both of us. A little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, there were some really dark days around Houston Texans football. Yeah, it's a lot brighter these days.
That's good to hear, man. That's good to hear. Always love to compliment an AFC team because there's basically no stakes. So this should be a pretty fun show.
Sure, exactly. Yeah, see you in the Super Bowl.
Exactly, man. All right, cool. Let's talk about the roster a little bit. I know that the Texans injury report just came out. It's not even on their website yet, so we're working with fresh information. Not fresh for our listeners who will be listening to this hours later, but still fresh for us, man. Any new interesting items on the injury report that we should be aware of from the Texans side of things?
The scariest thing for the Houston Texans is not only is starting running back Joe Mixon not practicing with an ankle injury, but backup running back Dameon Pierce is not practicing with a hamstring injury. So your top two running backs not playing potentially in this one. And DeMeco Ryans is a huge proponent of players have to practice to play on Sundays. It's not a rule because he's broken it before, so it's not a rule. But he very much likes players to practice during the week before they play on Sundays. So with no practice on the first 2 days of practice, I would say no practice for both those guys tomorrow. It feels like it's going to be.
So we're going to get the biggest revenge game that we've all been hoping for. Cam Akers,
the Cam Akers situation. Yes. So Cam Akers showed up a couple of days after training camp started. After Joe Mixon got hurt, actually, I thought he was here as a camp body. He plays really well in the preseason, outplays even outplays one of their draft picks that they made in the later rounds, and just turns into almost a must keep for this team. And then week one he was inactive, and it's like, okay, what's the deal? Dameon Pierce is inactive for Sunday Night Football. Akers is. Mixon gets hurt on a hip drop tackle, and then Cam Akers comes in, rattles off 32 yards on 7 carries, but fumbles the football on what would have been the touchdown that puts away the Bears. And so you're like, can I depend on this guy? And if you can't depend on Cam Akers, it's some conglomeration of Dare Agumbawale and rookie fullback / running back / tight end British Brooks. So it's it got all of a sudden very, very thin at the running back spot for the Houston Texans.
Is that going to be a situation where they like look at what they have and they say, I don't know that we have the horses to really run the ball as much as we want, and they might just throw the ball a bit more than they typically do, or they kind of really stick to our philosophy no matter who we got?
So that's actually a fantastic question, because this is a team that last year, with Bobby Slowick as the offensive coordinator, and he's still the offensive coordinator, and a rookie C.J. Stroud, there were some early games in the season where they were very content to bang their head into a wall and get nowhere running the football. And then Slowick, coming into the game against the Buccaneers last year, he changes his approach. They throw a lot. And C.J. Stroud sets a rookie record for, all sorts of passing records in that game against the Buccaneers. And so I do wonder if, they're not going to it's not going to full on be, 2007 Texas Tech football, but they've got 3 really good wide receivers. They've got a good tight end. They've got an offensive line that should pass block pretty well, and they're not going to be afraid to throw the football. I always think about the preseason game where they did play some of the starters, and it was 4th and 1, and they threw to Stephon Diggs. And then there was a 3rd and short later on that they threw to Stephon Diggs. And it's like, they're not afraid to throw the football. They'll kind of poke and prod and see if Akers can get something going, but I do expect a couple of more opportunities there for CJ Stroud to put it in the air.
Sure. Yeah, I do want to talk about the receivers, but that's going to be such a fun conversation. I'm going to put it off for a little bit and talk about that offensive line for a second. So first, I know that in week 1, I saw a couple of commentators mention that, this offensive line isn't going to be complete without Juice Scruggs. Like, that's just not going to happen. I know that he didn't practice yesterday. It sounds like, based off of what you told me, that he practiced today. Again, I haven't seen the full injury.
Yep,
okay.
Yep.
So we're going to see him.
Yes. So the Texans a year ago thought their offensive line was going to be Laramie Tunsil at left tackle, Kenyon Green at left guard, Juice Scruggs at center, Shaq Mason at right guard, and Titus Howard at right tackle. And then in training camp, Kenyon Green got hurt for the year. He was done. Juice Scruggs got hurt at the end of training camp. He was done till midseason. Titus Howard broke his hand. When he came back, he played left guard. They played George Fant at right tackle, who's I think in Seattle now. Yeah, so they did not get to start the offensive line they wanted a year ago. They came into camp this year. There were no position battles. It was left to right who they wanted on the offensive line. They play one game together. Scruggs gets hurt in practice, and they have to put a backup center in week 2 in Jarrett Patterson. And it didn't go great, but the Bears are a really tough defensive front when it comes to trying to run the football. So I credit the Bears a little bit, but I also kind of would criticize the Texans for kind of how that offensive line played from a run blocking standpoint. So Scruggs back, that's a boost because he just one game of evidence. He's just better than Jarrett Patterson. Mm-hmm. And they would like to get outside and zone block you to death. The Bears did not let them do that. The Bears wanted to put them back into the middle of the offensive line and the defensive line and kind of live with the results. And without Mixon, I know that the Texans will tout Cam Akers' vision, and he does have good vision, and he can make a couple of guys miss. I still don't believe he can maneuver exactly the way he wants to, because watching one of his big runs last week, he got to the sideline, and most running backs I feel like would have turned it up the field. Mm-hmm. And he kind of rode it out of bounds. And I was like, I wonder if that's maybe a leftover from multiple Achilles injuries where he can't quite turn on the dime. He's maybe turning on a quarter, instead. And so I am a little worried about the ability to run this football, even with Scruggs likely back in there at center.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm just looking over this offensive line. It's like a bunch of people I was wrong about, and Laramie Tunsil. I did not like Titus Howard. I was like, that guy shouldn't have even been a first-round pick. He was like a fourth-round pick to me. Shaq Mason. I mean, it was pretty easy to be wrong on Shaq Mason because his college offense was like Georgia Tech, right? It was like just, triple option BS. Patriots figured that out, and then I think he went to Tampa Bay. And then Juice Scruggs I didn't like. I think it might have been an athleticism thing. Kenyon Green I definitely didn't like. I thought he was more of a second-round pick. I think I was wrong about every single one of these guys. So fun offensive line construction.
Hey, welcome to the club, because I think I was too. When Titus Howard got drafted, everybody in this city wanted Andre Dillard to be the pick, and then the Eagles jumped in front of the Texans and got Andre Dillard. It ended up working out for the Texans much better. Shaq Mason. It's funny because I can remember. I don't remember exactly who wrote it. Forgive me to that person who put it out, but Mason's one of the only guards ever to have an awful first year in the NFL and then turn into a somewhat good guard. Like it just rarely happens to be that bad and then to turn into a serviceable player. And he's one of the only ones, when you go some of the advanced metrics and Pro Football Focus and stuff. And so Mason was kind of he was kind of like the what you look at for Kenyon Green, because Green was bad his first year, didn't play last year. So you're like, can he be another Shaq Mason? And 2 games, it's been fine. It's not amazing. It's been fine. So we'll see. There's a lot more question marks about an offensive line that they really wanted to put on the field than you would have hoped.
Fair enough. Yeah. And you mentioned that they should be good at pass protecting. I was kind of curious about, your word choice there.
Titus Howard is not as consistent as I'm sure most would like from someone who's one of the 5-6 most expensive right tackles in football.
Yeah.
So he's not as consistent. They've had a couple of – Shaq Mason's just gotten – I don't know if defensive coordinators see it or he just he makes a mistake, but it's almost like he got targeted with some of these late rushes or stunts where he ends up blocking somebody that's already been blocked and a free rusher shows up. So that's not been fun. And Laramie Tunsil, he's really, really good. Laramie would tell you he's the best left tackle in football. I don't know that he has a lot of people that exactly agree with him. Mm-hmm. Some of these stats tell you he's an excellent pass blocker, and some of the eye test doesn't always match that, in my opinion. But he's as good as anybody on any given day. Sure. So, for one game, if Laramie Tunsil's got to go out there and stop someone, and he's got familiarity with Jonathan Grenard, so if he's got to go out there and stop someone, he has the ability to do it. It's just, does he flip the switch that day? More days than not, he does.
Sure.
But I'm a little worried about the other 4 guys and the consistency of Titus Howard at right tackle. The cool thing about the way the Texans operate, though, is C.J. Stroud can make them right when they're really wrong because he sort of drifts, keeps plays alive, uses legs. So he can manage a little bit with some of the mobility that he has.
Sure. I also noticed, you mentioned some of the pass catchers. There's only 2 tight ends on the active roster. I assume someone is going to be promoted up right before game day or something like that. But what is? We like Dalton Schultz, but what does that overall tight end room look like?
So it's very interesting because they lost to an ACL injury. It just became official. They put him on IR yesterday, but Brevin Jordan is a player they were very excited about this season. And D'Amico Ryans, from basically the first couple of days of training camp, has been saying this guy's going to have a breakout season at tight end, going to have a breakout season. They played him a ton, basically 50% of the snaps the past couple of weeks. ACL injury, he's done. They've got Dalton Schultz and rookie 4th-round pick Cade Stover on the roster. And my guess is they will make a practice squad promotion of Irv Smith.
Bud, let's go.
Yes. Yeah. So my guess is they will make a practice squad promotion of Irv Smith, unless they want to go with a tight end I've genuinely have never heard of prior to his arrival in Houston, Chris Myrick. And so maybe they'd go with him because he can block, but I don't think that's really what Brevin Jordan's job was. So Irv Smith might give them a little bit more. But yeah, they only have 2 tight ends on the active roster. And they use their tight ends as fullbacks a lot too. They decided to not carry a fullback this year. And so they use Cade Stover primarily back there as sort of a lead blocker sometimes, but they'll motion Dalton Schultz out of that fullback spot on occasion, kind of get him a running start on a play. I'll be very interested to see if they do promote Irv Smith, how much he can give them on any given moment, because they don't feature the tight ends as much as maybe a year ago where, Schultz was the second best pass catcher on the team for stretches. That's very much not the case right now.
So when you take a look at like a Brian Flores defense, really aggressive in terms of blitzing, technically, I suppose less aggressive than last year, but that is a really high bar to clear. I think they're still the most blitz happy team in the league right now after 2 games. What do you make of like how, the quarterback, tight end, offensive line protection unit overall, has? I mean, because I remember like Brock Purdy is remarkable against the blitz, at least statistically, PFF grade, whatever, and just crumbled against the blitz against the Vikings. Like he was much better when the Vikings didn't send, 5 or 6 or 7. So like when you take a look at, CJ Stroud, his development as a passer, you take a look at this offensive line, you mentioned Shaq Mason, was attacked a couple of times pretty successfully. How the tight ends are tagged into the protection system. What do you think when you look at, this kind of Flores style defense?
I really liked the comment that offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick made when he was asked about some of the chaos pre-snap. And Slowick's comment was, hey, we coach and stress to our guys that you need to be successful post-snap. That's what matters more. Yes, we can use some of the moving pieces and the window dressing before the snap to figure out what's going to happen and maybe make an estimation, but you've got to be successful post-snap. Trust what you see. Trust what you believe you can execute. And so I do think some of it is just let's try to show as much as we can and then maybe do something that's not expected. But blitzing CJ Stroud it's a dangerous endeavor because he is not afraid to get rid of the ball to a short completion. Now, sometimes he'll make a mistake doing that. Last year he threw it to a couple of guys on short, quick stuff. And he's not afraid to escape if he feels like there's pressure. So he'll do I call it the drift. Mahomes drifts. Allen does it sometimes, but he likes to run. But Mahomes and Stroud and a few of these guys will drift and keep a play alive to try to make a throw. Well, CJ will make some mistakes doing that because it's no longer by the book. He actually said this week, I thought this was fascinating by Stroud. He prefers for everything to be on time and deliver from the pocket. He doesn't like trying to make a play out of nothing. Mm-hmm. He called it backyard football. He doesn't like that. He likes to take his drop, hit it in rhythm, and then let's go line up and do it again. Whereas I think sometimes some of these younger quarterbacks, they like a little bit of the excitement, the sexiness of let's go try to make a play. Stroud would love to be boring. I don't believe Brian Flores is going to give him many opportunities to be boring, but Stroud would love to be boring on Sunday.
Yeah, he's definitely like an interesting quarterback because you take a look at kind of the tools that he has as a prototypical quarterback, and you think, well, this maps on pretty well historically to people who have been, scramblers, people who buy time, people who improvise, and then you watch his game, and it's like he's an anticipation thrower. He's already one of the best anticipation throwers in the league, which the Vikings just went up against another one of them in Brock Purdy. But like he loves, I mean, his ability to kind of begin the process of the throw before the route breaks down is truly like a gift. Like I think that he's got a great understanding of defensive leverage. So his ability to read defenses, generally speaking, in a standard situation is pretty good. Again, we'll see what that looks like against Flores. His arm strength is phenomenal. There's a throw last week. It was an out from the opposite hash all the way to the sideline that I don't think it was caught, but it was just insane. And it's just like the way that he plays is, like you mentioned, very measured, very methodical, and just seeing the ball jump out of his arms like that, it's just like Jordan Love has a big arm and he uses it to get out of bad situations that sometimes he creates, right? It's a totally different style of quarterback. And the only thing I think with Stroud is that he's not always consistent and that his ball placement is like, okay, it's not amazing, right? And I just wonder if like the way to attack him is like with a Brian Flores style defense where his eyes are probably going to be wrong a couple of times, or where the ball placement's like really going to matter. You've got a safety kind of headhunting for crossers and stuff like that. He's already beginning to feel like one of the top passers in the league. How would you answer a CJ Stroud?
I would do as much as I can to heat him up and beat him up. I think if you're going to blitz him, if you're going to send pressure, or you're going to trust your defensive lineman to go get him, you've got to hit him. And I think about New York last year. Now they played the Jets last year. That was the first game without Tank Dell, and Nico Collins went out on the first play. So he immediately had a lack of weaponry to him. But the Jets beat him up. They beat him up. They were hitting him. They did not do what they showed. He made mistakes. He had to, dump out of plays, throw it into the ground. And it was one of the worst games that he played. Ultimately, he left with a concussion when Quinnen Williams came down on him. And actually, it's when he has a bad day in training camp, it's because the Texans defense did some of those things. They did something different than what they showed him. He will throw it to a linebacker. Like his first interception last year against the Saints, he threw it to a linebacker that did what he didn't expect him to do. Stroud talked about it after the game. He's like, yeah, he did something I've never seen him do on film. And so I threw it to where he was not supposed to be, and he was there. And so that happened in training camp a couple of times. Azeez Al-Shire, the middle linebacker for the Texans, would show up where he maybe wasn't supposed to be, and Stroud would throw him the football. And I'm like, oh, okay, like that's great for the defense. I kind of wish the quarterback wouldn't throw an interception in practice. But that's kind of what I would do. Is I would do my best, because he is cerebral. But if he guesses wrong, he'll make a mistake, and he'll give you an opportunity. I know he only threw 5 interceptions last year. He threw 15 interceptable balls. They caught 5 of them. Okay. So, he had some good luck last year. And through a couple of games here, I mean, look, he had an interception wiped away against Indianapolis that the guy's foot came out with less space than Isaiah Likely in week 1. He was out of bounds. And then he had another one wiped away on a pretty iffy penalty call against Indianapolis. So, I mean, he will give defenses opportunities. He just has been incredibly lucky in that they have not always taken advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, let's talk about this receiver corps before we talk about the defense, because Jesus, is it fun. So you got like Tank Dell, who does not play quite like a tank, but is a pretty fun, exciting player to have. And there's a couple of guys that feel like they could play a Tank Dell role. I mean, you got Xavier Hutchinson, who I think was from Tennessee. You've got John Mechie III.
Iowa State for Hutchinson.
That's it. That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
It's still a fake offense.
Yes.
John Mechie III. And these guys that have the ability to kind of get downfield. It feels like Tank Dell is not playing up to what we expected after a really successful rookie season. Again, only through 2 weeks. But then you've got Nico Collins, who broke out in a big way last year, seems to be even better this year. I don't know. Really high volume target guy so far in this offense. Obviously, they traded for Stephon Diggs, essentially replacing Robert Woods, who's still on the roster, with Diggs. I don't know, like this, you can attack all 3 levels. You've got receivers that have the ability to win in a bunch of different ways. A lot of times people will talk about offenses, you need your receivers to be like a basketball team. You need a bunch of different body types, a bunch of different ways to win. It feels like the Texans have done that, right?
Yes, they have. The cool thing that I like about the way they operate with their receivers is everybody can do everybody's job. So if you want Tank Dell to line up in the slot, which he, despite his size and what people think and thought he was going to do last year, he lined up outside more than he did inside last year. Like, you want him to line up in the slot with Diggs and Nico outside? Cool, they can do that. You want to dump Nico down into the slot and have him be a big body that wins against somebody? They can do that. Diggs is kind of their primary slot guy. They like to put him down there and just kind of let him win. But they are interchangeable in a lot of ways. They trust each other they trust each of the wide receivers to do what the other guy does in their style. And we're really just one. I'm simultaneously mad at Tank Dell and I'm mad at Bobby Slowick for Tank Dell's first 2 games, because it feels like with the addition of Diggs, they've used Dell a lot more as a gadget guy, which is what people thought he was in the draft process and what he proved he was not last season. I mean, he got hurt against Denver, at home, but he was on pace for 12 touchdowns and 1,200 yards. And he was a lot of times the go-to guy when him and Nico Collins were both on the field. And so this year there's been a reverse or, a pitch to Dell or a handoff. Like, stop making Tank Dell a gadget guy. Like, let him be a wide receiver like he was a year ago. But at the same time, Tank dropped a pass where he would have easily outran the defense and had a 50-yard touchdown. And if you dropped 50 yards and a touchdown onto his total, all the wide receivers would be happy with where they are. Diggs would have 70 yards and 2 touchdowns. Nico would have all the yards. And then Tank would have, 80-something yards and a touchdown. And you'd be like, oh, they spread it around really well. Yeah. So it's like Tank dropped the touchdown last week. Like that's on his resume for this season. Sure. So they put a lot more 3 wide receiver sets on the field than they did last year, it feels like. They were content to put some 2 tight ends out there and let those 2 wide receivers win. But Nico's the guy he's the locomotive that makes this offense run. I mean, he's the vision that you had for Nico Collins that was not present for the first 2 years finally came to fruition last year. And they stopped using him like it really felt like they used him the first couple of years like Mike Williams. Hey, you're tall. Run down the sideline and catch a jump ball. And then Nico got healthy. Bobby Slowick showed up, and they're like, well, you're really big, and it feels like you'd be tough to defend over the middle. Let's run you over the middle. Okay, cool. And he does this. He does in-breaking about as good as anybody. He beats man defense. Heading into this season, he was beating man defense at the end of last year at some advanced metrics behind only CeeDee Lamb. Like, Nico is the guy for this team. He gets open. He's tough. He makes tough catches. I'm pretty sure he played through what should have been a concussion in week 1 because he took a nasty hit at the end of a play, and he did not miss a snap. And I was like, oh, my goodness, they're going to let him keep playing? Okay, cool. And he hadn't shown up on the injury report with it at all. So, maybe he's got a titanium skull or something. But he is the guy you've got to worry about because he can beat you. Like you can have a Nico Collins day and he can dominate your defense, and you're going to be sitting there in the postgame thinking, gosh, we shouldn't have let Nico Collins beat us because we knew it was coming. Like that's what I think Nico Collins is. And then Diggs and Dell and the tight ends and everybody else kind of fits in behind him right now.
Okay. Is Diggs kind of washed now? What's going on?
He was the best offensive player in training camp.
Okay.
So, the only guy that even had a chance to defend him in training camp was Derek Stingley. And I would tell you that they went probably 50-50 on their, reps, both one-on-ones and within the schematics of the defense. They trust Stephon Diggs for some really tough catches. I mean, CJ Stroud had a beauty of a throw over a defender, into Diggs' breadbasket for a first down last week. They trust him on, third and mediums, third and longs to just catch the ball over the middle. And it kind of stuck in my brain. Bobby Slowick said very early on in the process of after they've gotten Diggs was we really like him as a runner with the ball in his hands. And we don't really feel like he's been given a ton of those opportunities where we throw him the ball. There's a lot of open space and he kind of makes things happen once he's got the ball in his hands. It feels like maybe they thought he was kind of, possession-y throughout the course of his, time in Buffalo at times. So they love to run him over the middle into space, get him the ball and let him work and try to make guys miss and steal first downs, on third and more than most guys are comfortable with. It has not been cohesive enough on offense for Stroud to just kind of sit back and start putting dots all over the field. The Colts brought some heat. The Bears were able to heat up Stroud a little bit, and they probably ran the ball a little bit too much for my liking because they couldn't run the ball against the Bears. So there hasn't been one of those moments where it's like, remember when Peyton Manning was in a zone and he could just get the ball to everybody? Yeah. Like through 2 games, there hasn't been, a quarter and a half where Stroud can get the ball to anybody at any time. So I don't think we've seen sort of the top end of what Diggs brings to the table. I will say I watch every time, the ball goes to someone else and it looks like maybe Diggs was open just to kind of play the body language game. And he seems content at this point. Like there's not any throwing my hands up. There's not any, hey, like, look at me, like, hey, I was open, hey, wave, show up the quarterback, wave my hands. He comes off the sidelines a lot of times, and then he'll look at the tablet with CJ Stroud and some of the coaches, and then he does a lot of, it's even on the sidelines in the games, but also he does it a ton at practice. He does a lot of coaching with the other wide receivers, and DBs. He said that it felt like it was his duty to pass on his knowledge here in Houston while he was here. I mean, he's here for a year. He's going to move on at the end of this year. So he felt like it was his duty to pass on what he knows as a football player to his teammates while he was here. So, I mean, the guys seem to like him. He seems to be content right now. He's the team leader in touchdowns. So it's tough to
Right.
if he came into someone's office and said, hey, I need the ball more, I would say, hey, you're the touchdown leader on the team. So what do you need?
Right.
I mean, they ran 2 red zone plays for him to score. So it just so happened to be that was a good matchup for him. Him versus Kenny Moore in week 1. It worked out well for the Texans. They're going to do that. They're going to try to exploit, non-premier cover guys on Diggs when they put him in the slot. So he seems to be good enough right now. Is he going to be Buffalo's Stephon Diggs? Probably not. That guy probably isn't there. But he may never get close to the volume to showcase Buffalo's Stephon Diggs. He's the second most targeted receiver in football over the past 4 seasons. That's not going to be the case here. Nico's going to get more targets, and Tank Dell's going to be nipping at his heels for targets.
My experience has been, I don't know how many people have shared this observation. Like when I share it with them, I don't know how many people actually agree, but my experience with him has always been that he's upset if they lose and he didn't get the ball. If they win, it doesn't seem like he's been that upset. And I think that's a really important distinction because he wants a chance to dig a team out if they need it. And so he gets pretty heated if he doesn't have a chance to keep the team from losing. So it is maybe a little bit more nuanced, or maybe I'm just kind of reading into it, trying to defend the guy.
Well, I also feel too, I mean, the last 1,000-yard receiver he played with was Adam Thielen all those years ago in Minnesota. I mean, he never played with another 1,000-yard receiver in Buffalo. I mean, Cole Beasley was I think a second-team All-Pro one year, but didn't have 1,000 yards. I mean, Collins, was fantastic last year. Tank Dell was on his way to getting past 1,000 yards. Again, to me, it feels easier for Stephon Diggs to come to the sideline and be like, oh, that guy got the ball instead of me. Oh, okay. Like, it's easier for him to understand that than when Gabe Davis gets the football instead of him.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, you mentioned Derek Stingley. I do want to talk about this defense. Right now, looks like a top 10 defense. Its success rate on dropbacks is 4th in the NFL. So pretty high level passing dropback success rate. I think 9th overall in passing EPA, which suggests a minor vulnerability to big plays, but generally speaking, pretty consistent from down to down. And we saw Derek Stingley pull off, pretty crazy good interception. We saw Kamari Lassiter do the same thing as well last week. I've always liked Jimmy Ward ever since, he's coming out of, I think it was like Northern Illinois, moved from San Francisco to Houston to chill some more with D'Amico Ryans. I don't know anything about Kalen Bullock. I don't know that much about Eric Murray, but overall this back end seems pretty good. And then Jalen Petre, who headhunts a lot, which is sometimes useful, sometimes maybe not.
So this secondary is in a very unique spot. They've got 4 guys that have played basically 100% of the snaps through the first 2 weeks. Jimmy Ward, Jalen Petre, Derek Stingley, and Kamari Lassiter. So they're 2 outside corners. Petre is your nickel corner / slot corner / star / small linebacker, whatever you want to call him. Like, he doesn't have he just plays the Petrie position as well.
Antoine Winfield did the same thing for the first couple of years with Tampa Bay as well.
Yeah, and it's more in tune with what Petrie did at Baylor, where he was really successful, and it's more in tune with some of the opportunities he was afforded as a rookie, where he was much more successful than his second year last year. So I like the secondary, and the secondary is going to look awesome when the pass rush takes care of business. Stingley has moments where you're like, should he have been beaten there? And then he has moments where it's like, oh, only 4 guys can make that play. He's aggressive. He's mean. He's not afraid to help in stopping the run. And if you throw sideways and short at Derek Stingley, he's going to attack that wide receiver like a heat-seeking missile. Sometimes that guy's going to spin out of the tackle, and sometimes that guy's going nowhere for no gain. I do believe if he is healthy this year, through the entirety of the year, Derek Stingley is going to be a first-team All-Pro at cornerback.
Oh, wow.
He was one of the best cornerbacks in football when he returned from his injury last year. He was incredible. And the pass rush is going to make his job so much easier this year. His level, he was the best defensive player in training camp. So him and Diggs were the two best players in training camp this year for the Texans. And so Stingley is incredible. He will get beat though. I mean, he will be aggressive and a quarterback, Anthony Richardson never had the opportunity. Williams missed a couple of times. A quarterback that can connect with their guy on that opportunity will take advantage of Derek Stingley's aggressiveness. But there's going to be some times where his aggressiveness just works for him, and he's excellent. So the rookie, Kamari Lassiter, I mean, there's going to be some teams looking around wondering why they drafted their cornerback and not this guy. The biggest thing I think you can say about a guy is, does he play like he played in college at the NFL level? And it feels like Lassiter does. Like, he's physical. He probably gets away with a little bit from a physicality standpoint.
Yeah. He kind of needs to, right? Because he doesn't have the top end speed of like a Stingley or a bunch of other corners, so he has to make up for it by being physical. And so you got to get good at it so you can get away with it.
He has never appeared football slow, but he's not winning any foot races. I guess that's what I would say about Kamari Lassiter. And so, and again, aggressive guy can get beat as well. I do worry about their susceptibility to big plays because Jimmy Ward is not fast anymore, and they do put Eric Murray on the field a lot. If Kalen Bullock's on the field, I'm not as worried about the big plays because they let him play center field like he's King Griffey Jr. They just stick it back there, and they're like, hey, make the other 10 guys right. And that's what they do with Kalen Bullock, and it's worked out so far when he's been on the field. Murray, not so much when Eric Murray is out there. So that's a little interesting when they do. And look, they start 2 linebackers and 4 defensive linemen, and the rest are DBs. Like that's their main package, and then they'll run Henry To'o out of there, and they'll put 1 linebacker on the field with 4 linemen, and the rest are DBs. So sometimes you can get pretty physical with them if you want to. I'm surprised the Colts didn't more because that was a close game the whole time, and it felt like they could have got Jonathan Taylor going a little bit more. The Bears could not do anything from a run standpoint. The front 7, I guess the front 5 is what I would say. Those 4 linemen and Azeez Al-Shire kind of took care of business there. Petrie helps a lot with the run game as well. So this cannot last all season because you can't play these guys this much, but DeMeco Ryans is very, very much of the ilk of, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to win the game this week, and I'll think about next week. So if I've got to play Jimmy Ward, Jalen Petrie, Kamari Lassiter, and Derek Stingley 100% of the snaps for 3 straight weeks to win 3 games, I'll do it. And then if one of them gets hurt, I'll put someone else in. Like, he is very much, it is this week, we have to win this week, and we will do everything we can to win this week. And I think back to how different that is from like when Bill O'Brien was here. Bill O'Brien held Jadeveon Clowney out of a game against the Packers because it was an NFC game, and it didn't matter in the tie breaking to the Texans because it was an NFC game and there were no like mutual opponents or something like that. Right. It's like it didn't matter in the tiebreaker, so they literally didn't care what happened in that game. And like that would never happen with DeMeco Ryans. He'd have played Clowney and he'd have played him 90% of the snaps probably. So it's like, I do like that approach. Do I worry in the middle of October when guys are on the injury report for 3 straight weeks? Yeah, I worry a little bit about that, but it's September. So I'll worry about October. When
He's adopting the philosophy, really. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about these linebackers because the broadcast was like enamored with To'o last week, it seemed like. And then, of course, there's a little bit of controversy. I shouldn't say a little bit, a lot of controversy about Azeez Al-Shire, throwing a pretty clean punch, but, a punch is not a clean play. I don't know. I haven't heard anything about him receiving a suspension for this game. What's going on there?
I do not anticipate he'll be suspended. I even think that there's going to be probably some outrage with how much he gets fined based on some of the rumors. And that there people not that he got fined too much, that maybe he got fined not enough.
No, I figured that's what you meant.
Yeah. So he may have gotten away with one from that standpoint. And D'Amico Ryans was sort of defensive of his guy, and he was like, "Yeah, they shouldn't crowd him, and there shouldn't be ununiformed personnel near him." But we also can't throw punches. And I was like, okay good. I'm glad you got the disclaimer in there. Alshire is he's the extension of D'Amico on the field. He knows this defense. D'Amico Ryans is a father figure to him. Ryans was instrumental in Alshire figuring out how to be an NFL player in San Francisco. Like, they have a unique relationship that I don't know that every coach and his, linebacker have. So those guys are inherently connected. And they wanted him on the team so bad last year, and it just didn't work out. And so they went and got him this year. They paid him a lot of money, and they're really happy with him. And he's very good, and hopefully he doesn't punch anybody and get ejected. So the To'o thing is fascinating because coming into the Texans last year, I don't know that there was any worry about Henry To'o between the ears. There was a lot of worry about his athleticism and the ability to hold up and his tackling. And then he wasn't athletic enough, and he tackled really bad. And coming into this year, To'o said, hey, I spent the entire offseason getting better at tackling. And then he, unprompted, said, I was not in good enough shape last year. I told my wife, quit baking cupcakes, quit doing all this stuff for me. I've got to get in better shape. And he showed up, and he's a much better football player than a year ago.
I don't know that I would have the strength of will to tell my significant other to stop making cupcakes. I would just have to become bad at tackling.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, he was brutally honest about his performance last year. I was fascinated because you don't get that level of openness. He's like, I was not in good enough shape. I couldn't handle it. And I listened to General Manager Nick Caserio on a podcast the other day, and he was talking about how tackling, people think that you can't get better at it unless you're tackling in games and in practice. And he actually disagreed with that. And he thought that tackling is one of the things that you can actually work on yourself by yourself to a large degree to get better at. And he felt like To'o did that in the offseason. They trust him. Jake Hansen, who's the third linebacker on this team, has basically not played. And he played a lot in the preseason, and they liked what Hansen did, but they trust Alshire and To'o, and that's about all they trust right now at the linebacker spot. And those are going to be the guys that are out there. And then To'o will come off the field. Kalen Bullock will come on the field, and they'll put a bunch of defensive backs out there and hope that you don't big body them.
All right. And then we get, I think, I don't know about maybe the most exciting. That secondary was quite good.
The main event, baby.
Man, I love these guys. Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter. I truly believe in Derek Barnett as a rotational guy and nothing else. I think that he's very good for that role specifically. Tim Settle has, I think, been quite good throughout his career without a ton of opportunity, I think, because of injury and without a ton of acclaim. Obviously, you got Foley Fatukasi. You've got Mario Edwards, who has flashed a bunch. This is a group to me. I love these guys.
They are a bunch of dudes, and these guys, I don't know. I mean, I guess I get it from like a standpoint of how people operate defenses, but hearing Danielle Hunter talk about playing in this style of defense, where they basically tell their defensive linemen, go be a monster, go create chaos. Don't think about it, just go. And Hunter said that in Minnesota for a long time, it was read this, do that. He's like, that's not what they want me to do. They want me to just go. And he loves it. And Mario Edwards has never played in this type of attack front, and he loves it. And Fatukasi played in it with with Robert Saleh and the Jets a couple of years ago, and he loves it. And obviously Anderson, I mean, right. he's loving it. And they just love this style, and they basically I think it's really fun to watch. They let Will Anderson go be a grenade. Go in there and create chaos, and everybody else will make you right. And then Hunter is sort of this. I want to say he's Greg Maddux because he's got like all these different moves that he throws at you. But he also, if he wants to go be Randy Johnson and just be power, he can be power with people too. Like he's he's like a fine-tuned machine. Will Anderson's nickname coming in was the Terminator. They started calling Daniil Hunter the Cyborg.
Yeah.
So they got two machines at the edge. And then a point that I really thought was actually a really interesting point that defensive coordinator Matt Burke, who, he doesn't call the plays. He's just kind of there to kind of help out. But he brought up about Derek Barnett, and I'm glad you mentioned him. Like, outside of Brandon Graham, Derek Barnett has probably played more snaps in this style of defense than just about anybody else in the NFL. And I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. They added him off waivers last year. He was nice down the stretch. They brought him back. He doesn't love talking to the media. I've been trying to talk to him for
I
weeks.
totally sympathize, man.
Yeah. I don't have anything hard hitting. I just want to talk football with him. But like, I got a meeting. Oh no, I got to do this. He's like, oh, I'm on special teams this week. You're not on special teams this week. Don't
We know the score, man. Yeah.
Yeah. He is a really fun third defensive end. They will use him because Anderson's not 100% from his stamina and wind because he missed a month of training camp. So they'll use Barnett a lot. And then, they don't have Danico Autry, who was a $10 million investment this offseason. He got suspended. When he gets back, it's going to be a really fun defensive line room. But Edwards has been better than anybody could have expected. Fadakasi's doing what they need him to do. They were very, without publicly saying it, they wanted two guys at defensive tackle who would do exactly what the defense wanted them to do and not do anything else. And that's what they went out there and tried to get when they turned over their entire defensive tackle room. Sheldon Rankins is on a different team. Malik Collins is on a different team. And then they brought in Settle and Edwards and Fadakasi. And they just wanted guys that do exactly what the defense asked them to do. And then the ends and the linebackers take care of everything else when those guys do their job. And then when you focus on the ends, all of a sudden Mario Edwards comes flying through and nearly decapitates Anthony Richardson or smushes Caleb Williams, so it's a really, really fun defensive end group. They brought plenty of heat last week on Caleb Williams just to force him into decisions. Darnold feels a bit more equipped because he's played so much football to kind of handle that look. So I do wonder if maybe there's going to be some show the heat, pull off. Let's just see if those four linemen can win and make Darnold make a mistake with them winning without any sort of extra. There's been some moments in D'Amico Ryan's tenure here with the Texans where he's had some inopportune blitzes that just, cratered what should have been a good defensive drive. I can think back to Carolina last year. The only game the Panthers won, he blitzed Bryce Young and basically telegraphed that he was doing it. And Bryce Young somehow was ready for it and hit a quick pass and big first down. And that was pretty much all she wrote for the Texans in that moment because of an ill-timed blitz. So I don't know if he'll bring the heat on Darnold because Darnold's maybe more equipped to handle it, but he's not afraid to throw an extra guy or send Petrie off the edge. They like Petrie blitzing, man. They trust him to kind of knife through things and cause some chaos. So it will be fun to watch how he treats the four defensive linemen and how much help he feels like maybe he wants to add to. Because this is probably one of the least talked about good tackle duos in football. Like, I don't know that anybody that's talking about these guys in Minnesota as far as a capable tackle duo. I mean, Minnesota's paid both of them. They seem pretty content with both those guys, and they've had some pretty good results. So, this is a fun in tackle matchup that
for sure,
you don't always,
especially because there's so much familiarity too. Like you mentioned with Tunsil and Grenard, obviously Hunter and O'Neal. It's going to be kind of fun to see how that all plays out. And like you said, this tackle group is a pretty high level tackle group. Like maybe not the Eagles, but top 5, I think, as a pair. Certainly a really high level group, and it should be fun from a pass protection standpoint. Obviously, the interior offensive line for the Minnesota Vikings has been up and down over the years. I'd say we're closer on the upswing, but that's all relative. I wouldn't put the interior offensive line up against most teams. But as a run blocking group, they've been a lot better than as a pass protection group, which, before we wrap up by talking about kind of big picture stuff and special team stuff, maybe, I did want to ask about this. Like, the rush success of the Texans, like in the aggregate, I think like an EPA or something like that, they're like 16th or 17th or whatever. But it feels like it's impossible to evaluate because I have no respect for the Bears' run blocking, and it is difficult to compare run defense against a team that has a running threat like Indianapolis does at quarterback and teams that don't, like Minnesota, right? I mean, Sam Darnold can move, but his only rushing yards come on scrambles, obviously. So what is your estimation based off of, these last two games and what you know about this team and what the defensive tackles can do and what those linebackers can do, generally speaking, of an ability to shut down a running game where Minnesota's probably had the best running game they've had in 4 or 5 years?
I'll be shocked is probably not where I would go, but I'll be pleasantly surprised if they're not one of the 3 best rush defenses in football when this is all said and done.
That's aggressive.
I mean, they and Indianapolis week 1 is to me sort of where I kind of look at it and I'm like, whoa, like they were on it, and maybe that's early season and this and that, and I didn't love the way that Shane Steichen called that game for the Colts, but Jonathan Taylor is Freddy Krueger to the Houston Texans. Prior to that game to open the season, he'd played 6 games against the Texans with 900 yards of offense.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. He played 6 games with 900 yards of offense and 8 touchdowns. So he was a nightmare to deal with. I've watched a lot of really bad run stopping football. Derrick Henry took up residence in NRG Stadium basically every time he came here, with the exception of last year. But like week 1 against Jonathan Taylor, who hobbled last year, went for like $188 on him in the final game of the regular season, like and to hold him to 3 yards a carry and to basically never let him get going. And then you do it to Chicago. Who cares? Okay, I don't think they can run the football at all. Like, this feels like a pretty good test. There is an immense amount of respect in that building for Kevin O'Connell. From the way DeMeco Ryans talks about him to the way CJ Stroud talks about him. I know that he was extremely impressive when the organization interviewed him to potentially be a head coach before ultimately he decided on Minnesota. Like, there's an immense amount of respect for Kevin O'Connell and what he can operate as an offensive mind. So they will, and I think beating San Fran last week is a great way to whip everybody into focus on just how good you have got to be to defeat this Vikings team and the way that they're operating right now and the consistency that they bring to the table and some of the smoothness with which they operate. And look, Sam Darnold came into the season one of the historically like a terrible quarterback. It's not like he didn't turn into Tom Brady, but if he's not going to make a back-breaking mistake and he can get you a first down here and there, like, you can win football games with him. So again, there's an immense amount of respect for Kevin O'Connell. He's one of the only coaches that feels like he's at everything. Like, I remember seeing him at the Senior Bowl. I see him out and about at the scouting combine. Like, I feel like he goes to everything. He's just a football junkie. And I feel like other younger football junkies really respect what he brings to the table as an offensive mind. And they are not taking, I think when I play, before the season, when you play the win-win, loss game on the Texans schedule, most everybody just went and put a W next to the Minnesota game. That is not the case going into this week. I feel like even Texans fans, but certainly the building, have a lot more respect for what this Vikings team is through the first couple of weeks of the season and are more dialed in and focused than I would have expected 6 weeks ago when training camp was getting going,
Fair enough. Before we get to final game predictions, can you pronounce Kaimi Fairbairn's full name?
No chance. No chance. I mean, it's like 900 letters.
Yeah. So we have a thing about kickers, first because it's the Minnesota Vikings, but second because we've got a fantasy league that is very kicker focused because that's stupid and funny. And we had a listener come in and say, they'd give us a ton of money if James would pronounce Kaimi Fairbairn's name, and it still has not happened yet. So I'm just trying to get around to getting someone to do it.
The best part about like so many of these players on the Texans is their first name is not their first name. So like Kaimi Fairbairn. His first name is
John Christian Fairbairn. Easy enough.
Yeah. Well, and then the heritage portion of his name that is just impossible to say. But like even even a couple of weeks ago, Nico Collins, his name is not his God-given name is not Nico.
What is it?
His name is Dominique Stephon Collins.
No way. Well, that's really cool, actually.
Like CJ Stroud is Coleridge Bernard. Yeah. There's like the Texans. I mean, they might lead the league in made up first names or not first names. But yeah. So I do want to mention special teams because Fairbairn obviously has been fantastic. This is not what he has always been. I mean, the game against the Colts at the end of last season, he missed an extra point that nearly cost them a chance to go to the playoffs. But he talked about between the ears, he got right this offseason. He's been in the league for like almost a decade now. He's playing the best football he's ever played. He likes the new kickoff, which I feel like is counterculture to how the special teams coordinator Frank Ross talks about the new kickoff. So Kaimi likes it. He talked about how, previously we were just, to use a golf analogy, we were just using a driver. And he's like, now we get to put different clubs in the bag. And I was like, okay, all right, I like this.
Yeah, have you seen like teams try to like hook it to make it uncatchable so that it lands in the one and then rolls into the end zone for the 20-yard touchback?
So the Texans have not encountered a ton of that yet. It's been fairly normal, but they are aware that could get unique very quickly. And they do not try it very often because I think they do believe in their defense a lot. So if they got to give it to you at the 30, okay, we'll give it to you at the 30 and play defense. So they haven't tried it a lot, but I do have a special teams note for you. And I found this out today, and we were talking to special teams coordinator Frank Ross, and I was curious because the Texans have been around or played teams that dealt with punt blocks so far this season. So the Texans blew up coverage week 1, and they allowed a punt block to the Colts. They played the Bears, who scored on a punt block in week 1
against the Steelers.
They're going to play the Vikings this week, who
just scored off a punt block.
Scored on a punt block. There were 7 punt blocks in the NFL last season. There have been 4 in the first 2 weeks. The Texans were the victims of one, the Vikings were the creators of one, and the Texans played the Bears, who scored off of another one. So this was mind-blowing to me. It was a fascinating moment, and the way special teams coordinator Frank Ross talked about it, he's like, every now and then, like somebody just is perfect on special teams and they fly in there like it's a movie and they block a punt. He's like, that's not what's been happening. Like, guys are making mistakes that they shouldn't make, and punt blocks are happening at an alarming rate compared to what it was last year. So his goal, and I feel like I'm talking about a great loss in his life every time we bring it up, but his goal is to literally never let that happen again, because he has talked about it ad nauseum. Even walking out to practice last Friday, he saw me in the hallway and he goes, "You guys were too easy on me at the press conference yesterday on the block."
That's a wild thing for a coordinator to say.
I was like, Frank, we asked you about the punt. I thought you handled it really well. He brought it up today because I asked him about it, but he's like, we cannot let that happen again.
So you're telling me that September 8th is like his September 11th?
It feels that way. That's the first blocked punt of Tommy Townsend's career.
Yeah, I was going to ask how often this happened to Townsend, because he's an insanely good punter who's had a really long career.
Yeah. So it's the first blocked punt of Tommy Townsend's career. And then Townsend has I think it was the first punt he had against the Bears. It was a terrible punt. And so we were like, oh no, does he have punt block PTSD? Yeah. What's going on here? So as much as I told you about how they speak about Kevin O'Connell in the building, Frank Ross did the same thing for Matt Daniels and the special teams of the Vikings. and he's the only coordinator that does a press conference when he starts his media availability. It's very funny, but it gives us great details on who to pay attention to from a special team standpoint. He loves their coverage. He doesn't anticipate being able to return a lot of punts because they're very fast and aggressive. He wants to get off clean punts. He likes the rookie kicker, which is probably not typical of special teams coaches. I guess, if they had their choice, they probably wouldn't want the rookie, but he seems to like the rookie kicker. And so I think that's one of those hidden things that where you look at this team and it's like, hey, this is a pretty good team. It's a pretty good team. Like, is somebody going to make a special teams that changes the game? That's like the difference maker. Like the Texans are going to try like hell to avoid that. And they do a lot of. I mean, I'm shocked at the amount of special teams. I'm shocked at the amount of special teams periods they have in practice, but they put an emphasis on it. That's for sure.
Yeah. So right now, Townsend is the only punter with over 5 punts that has allowed 1 or fewer punt return yards. So. Aside from that, I mean, obviously having a miss hit, that's not good. Obviously the block is awful, but in terms of the stuff that he can kind of control, he's got a really good hang time. So it's not too bad. I think he still got it.
There were some very slow moments in training camp where Townsend was punting, and I decided to get the timer out. It's very unscientific,
course,
but he put some amazing hang times together. And he puts some weird spins on the ball sometimes. He kicks like knuckleballs sometimes. Like he's kind of like he's a strange bird in the way that he's like, and they love punting in this building. And not that they
don't like to punt, but they love the art of punting.
Correct. Frank Ross, I mean, he gave a shout out to Torrey Taylor, the Bears punter, in his press conference today.
Goodness.
He's like, that was some great punting. Nick Caserio at the Senior Bowl spent a half of practice watching Torrey Taylor punt at the Senior Bowl, like not even paying attention to the actual football happening behind him. He was watching Torrey Taylor punt, and I'm just like, these guys love punting way more than I love punting.
That's incredible.
And it's probably killing them that they had that punt block in week 1.
It's their life's passion, and now, yeah.
It's like going to art school, graduating, and then your favorite artist tells you, "Yeah, that's not any good." It's like, oh no.
All right. So we've got so the Texans opened as 3.5-point favorites. That has been bet all the way down to 2, which is pretty significant, crossing the 3-point threshold. So Texans favorites by 2. It's probably going to get bet down to 1.5 if I'm being honest. What is your estimation of the game?
I believe that there's a tremendous amount of talent on Minnesota outside of the quarterback spot, and I believe there's a tremendous amount of talent on the Texans, including the quarterback spot. And I feel like that truly could be just the sole difference maker. Is I like a lot of the Minnesota players. I mean, Justin Jefferson is obviously incredible. Derek Stingley spoke more than 6 words about him, which is a record probably for how Derek Stingley talks about players. Like he thinks he is just one of the best. How couldn't you not? Right. Obviously, but like I mean,
LSU boys, they got to stick together, right?
Exactly. Jalen Naylor being a draft pick that kind of evolved into a fun player, in basically last week, like that's what D'Amico Ryans loves about football. He talks about it all the time. He's like, yeah, winning's great. And like, that's what you want. That's what you're here to do. He's like, but I really love watching guys get better, especially guys who've been around football for a couple years and it just kind of clicks for them. Like, I have a tremendous amount of respect for what Minnesota's putting together.
Just as an aside, that's really cool because D'Amico Ryans was a first-round pick who was good right away, immediately. And
so he was actually, so he's a second-round pick, but he's the first pick of the second round, I think. So right on the edge. But yeah, and he walked in. It's funny to hear guys tell the story. The second day of practice and training camp, everybody looked around and was like, oh, okay, so this guy's the dude? Okay, this guy's the dude. And he was drafted with Mario Williams, and I don't think anybody ever thought about Mario that way, which was funny. I like a lot of the defenders on Minnesota. Andrew Van Ginkel, and I liked him before people knew about him because of Hard Knocks. Van Ginkel's fun. Pace is interesting. Cashman has figured out how to stay healthy and play good football. Grenard's a great dude. Harrison Smith's like the gold standard for hanging around and still being good. Like I just feel like Sam Darnold versus CJ Stroud. Like I can't pick Sam Darnold. I can't. I feel like D'Amico Ryans will have enough that Darnold will make a mistake. And maybe it's not even a back-breaking mistake. It's just a mistake that the Texans can take advantage of. And there's your difference.
All right, fair enough, man. I kind of agree. I would take the Texans. I'd probably take the Texans at -2. I think the betting it down was a bit aggressive, but that's where the market is. Hopefully, I'm wrong. Hopefully you're wrong. Thanks for coming on. Where can people find you?
You just throw it in the Google machine. Cody Stutes in Google. You'll find everything you need from the Twitter to the YouTube to Houston football, where I do all my writing. And if the folks aren't reading you, man, they're missing out. You're fantastic. You do some incredible. I know you do a great job covering the Vikings and all that. You do some great non-Viking stuff that is so useful to non-Vikings fans and would be useful to Vikings fans as well. So I think you do a great job, and I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks so much, man. That's really kind. It's Cody Stutes, man. Thank you so much.
All right, let's go to the mailbag, and the first question is from Bill Botke, who asks, I see that Bryce Young is being benched by the Panthers. This suggests he could be a trade target in the offseason. Let's also assume Sam Darnold moves on from the Vikings after the season. Given that Kevin O'Connell has shown a good aptitude for reclamation projects, would it make sense for him to bring Bryce in as a backup for J.J. McCarthy? The pros to this would be he'd be getting a potential franchise quarterback for a reasonable price in case JJ does not work out. The cons are that Kevin O'Connell will be focused on getting JJ ready rather than getting Bryce ready to play. Bryce might be also expensive compared to other backup options, and Bryce might be a true bust. Is the risk worth the reward here?
I mean, obviously it depends on what the trade value is. Like if the trade market demanded a first round pick, I don't think there's any case where you could make the argument that based on what we know, right? I mean, anything could change, but based on what we know, that'd be reasonable. And for a 7th round pick, I think it'd be pretty clear that that's a pretty decent chance to take, right? So it's somewhere in the middle there. But I think generally speaking, given the price that he's probably going to go for, which might be like a mid-round pick, if he does get traded, which the Panthers are basically saying, yeah, what are you talking about? We wouldn't trade this guy. Sure. Whatever you say, guys. I would say probably the issue I'm having here is that there's an analytics answer and then there's kind of a coach brain answer, and both are pretty valid to me at the moment. I don't know what's happening to me. I would almost always a previous version of me would have just been yeah, from an analytics perspective, you got to do this. And the older I get, the more I just don't care about that. And I don't really love that about myself, but let me lay out both cases. So the quarterback position obviously is so overwhelmingly valuable that the capacity to hit on it is enormous. If you you do studies on what the hit rates in every round are quarterback and what the value you get on a hit versus a bust and how quickly you move on and what the contract expectations are and what the impact on the team is, and you model that out, it makes a ton of sense to draft 2 quarterbacks like Washington did with RG3 and Cousins, which turned out to be a insanely smart decision from a franchise not really well known for that. Drafting a quarterback when you have a quarterback on the roster. Green Bay does that all the time, right? They drafted, while they had Brett Favre, they drafted a bunch of other dudes on the roster. Aaron Rodgers was just one of them. Now, he was a first-round pick. A lot of those draft picks were second-round picks. But there were first-round picks that failed out, like Brian Brome, right? And then they continued to do that. That's how Jordan Love arrived, right? Is that they did it with Aaron Rodgers on the roster. And so they would keep on bringing in new quarterbacks. Successful teams seem to do this. It seems like a pretty smart thing to do. But I understand why you wouldn't, right? Because your goal is not to win 5 years from now. You don't even know if you're going to be coaching 5 years from now. Your goal is to win in the short term. And here's kind of an important thing. Your losses, no matter what the reason, will be held against you in your performance review, held and conducted by the media a year later, right? They will just quote your win-loss record. It doesn't matter if like they did it with Zimmer. They're like, Zimmer, he said he's a 600 coach, but actually he's a 580 coach. And it's like, yeah, man, like Teddy Bridgewater blew up. Like, what do you want? I don't know what to tell you. He lost his eye, dude. And so it's like, it's probably fair for him to call himself a 600 quarterback, but like no one gave him that. So if you lose your starting quarterback, like the Vikings lose JJ McCarthy, they want a guy that they feel that they can rely on to quote unquote manage the game, right? Whatever that means. That could be Nick Mullins, who doesn't play like a game manager, but certainly gives you a shot to win, right? Or it could be someone like a Sean Mannion, who I'm not going to argue he plays like a game manager because he throws more aggressive throws than he's got the ability to execute on. But like they trust him to essentially execute the offense, not freelance too much, right? And be like, hey, you got Justin Jefferson, so that's what you do, right? It could be any of those things, but it's certainly a guy where you have a floor for your expectation of performance. You don't want to be throwing Kellen Mond out there, right? So that's the idea, and you can remove a couple of losses that you otherwise would have with like this complete unknown. Like you can't be throwing like Nate Stanley out there, right? This complete unknown at quarterback is just going to lose you all the games. Like what was it when Denver ran out of quarterbacks because they all got COVID? And they put a receiver who had played quarterback for like a year in college in there, Kendall Hinton. And mind you, he technically didn't start that game. One of the running backs did. Was it Noshawn Moreno? Jesus. But one of the running backs started that game at quarterback. Anyway, they scored 3 points in that game. Like it's tough. Kendall Hinton completed one pass. It's tough. And so you can win maybe a couple of games, as we saw with Joshua Dobbs and Nick Mullins. You can win a couple of games with a guy that gives you a pretty low floor, but at least a floor. And so you can remove those losses from your performance review a year later when people will put you on the hot seat. And so I can see why you'd want a veteran in there, especially because you could lose a quarterback for a season, which would suck, or you could lose a quarterback for 4 games. If you win one of those 4 games, you could still be in the playoff hunt. And so I understand why you wouldn't do that and have Bryce Young in as a backup. And it's tough because I feel like he's probably an example of somebody that you wouldn't put on the practice squad, exposed to waivers, or allow another team to sign away for free if you're trading picks for him. And so you have to make him your backup quarterback. Now, a lot of veterans do exist on the practice squad. Sean Mannion was on the practice squad for a while. So you could still manage that situation. It's still possible, but it is a little bit difficult. I'm gonna come down on the statistical side of this. I think taking as many shots at quarterback as you can is nice. The Vikings, I think, are in a spot where I think they're not gonna do anything like that, which I don't think surprises anyone. But like, it's difficult to explain how effing bought in they are in JJ McCarthy. They love this guy, and they love this guy so much that when someone asked on the Minnesota Football Party, like, what if Sam Darnold just plays at the level that he's playing at, like right now, but for like the rest of the season, and they F around and win a playoff game or something, would they extend him because he's on a 1-year contract, right? And that's a tough answer. The fact that it's a tough answer tells you how much they love JJ McCarthy is like what I'm getting at. So I don't think they'll view this analytically. I don't think they'll view this as there is some probability that JJ McCarthy won't pan out. Maybe they should, right? And I know that they've got the analytics GM, but if we're being frank, he's not acting a lot like we'd expect an analytics, quote unquote, analytics GM to act anyway. So I wouldn't really, put it on that. But I think they probably should take those shots. I don't know if that shot is specifically with Bryce Young. Maybe you can use that 4th round pick on a different promising quarterback. But certainly that should be an option that you make available for yourself. I do think that he's cooked, but that's a binary answer when we're talking about probabilistic outcomes. Like, I think it's very likely he can't do anything, but if he pans out, the reward is immense. So you might as well take the risk.
Let's go to Hawkeye Ty Webb, who asks, which former Viking currently on the Texans will have the biggest impact on Sunday? There are 4, I believe: Cam Akers, Chris Boyd, Diggs, and Hunter.
Forgot Irv Smith.
And Irv Smith. I still think it's going to be Chris Boyd on special teams.
I think in terms of who could hurt the Vikings most, I think it's Danielle Hunter. Stephon Diggs, obviously very good. Not the lead receiver there. And I guess Hunter's not like the lead pass rusher to Will Anderson, but let's be real. I mean, they're both insane, right? They're both excellent. Also, as you might recall from the Stutes interview, I guess Will Anderson's nickname is the Terminator, and Danielle Hunter's nickname is the Cyborg. That's very concerning, I think. So that feels like a better answer. I think it's Hunter's going to have, and I'm kind of departing from my very analytics based answer in the previous one. Receivers tend to have a much bigger impact on games than edge rushers do, especially secondary and third receivers. There's like some research that suggests that the value of your top receiver isn't as important as the value of your third receiver. I have some issues with that research, but it is kind of an interesting concept that they've got a really high floor among the receiver group. Nevertheless, I think Hunter is such a good player that's probably the answer.
Let's go to Wham Warnold, who asks, what words of wisdom will Sam Darnold impart on CJ Stroud after the game, as Stroud attempted to do with Caleb Williams last week?
Yeah, Caleb didn't seem that receptive, but I don't like being a body language expert, so I'm not gonna say that Caleb brushed him off entirely. But were I, forced to figure out, if Caleb Williams was receptive to CJ Stroud saying, "Hey, you gotta get rid of the ball."
I mean, his whole thing was get rid of the ball quicker, and you can't keep taking those sacks. Like, these are things that you should hear. And hearing them from your colleagues, well, your contemporaries anyway, can be hard to do. But
it's funny because like Stroud is just like a second-year quarterback, right? And so it might feel like, come on, man, who are you, dude? But he's doing pretty well. You might want to listen to this guy.
It's the Bleacher Report thing with the comic where all the rookies have baby voices. Like, it feels like
exactly.
that. Yeah. Like, I envision him with the deepest voice possible, and Caleb Williams going, like, it's something like that.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, and I think I think it's pretty clear at this point that CJ Stroud is like genuinely like that's who he is as a person. He's like a very, he wants to help people out. Like, and I don't mean like there's a lot of like player puff pieces and stuff like that, and I usually get annoyed because I don't like biased writing all that much. Well, everything's biased, but I don't like that particular type of bias where it's like unanalyzed. And fluff pieces bother me a lot. I think that this is pretty genuine from CJ Stroud, like as a person, like it's just very embedded in who he is and how he's operated since like high school. So that's probably the case. Sam Darnold giving him advice does sound weird, but he is the older quarterback by a fair degree. I just don't know that his life experiences will match up to what CJ Stroud's life experiences will be on the current trajectory that he's on, right? Like Sam Darnold can't pull CJ Stroud aside and be like, okay, so when you get traded to Carolina, like that's just not going to happen, right? So it's tough. Probably invest in ghost detection equipment.
Maybe he's going to say, when you get mono, and then go from there.
No, CJ Stroud's a man of God. He would never, engage in that kind of risky behavior.
To acquire mono. All right.
Yeah.
Chris asks, given Kevin O'Connell's, quote, quieted mind approach to coaching quarterbacks, who do you think must have had the loudest mind he's coached so far, given how they were before and after meeting him?
I kind of want to say Nick Mullins. He's kind of a wild guy, but it could be Kirk Cousins. Like, Cousins thinks a lot in the pocket, like a lot, and he didn't play very free. He was very restrictive, and like robotic is a word that's often used to describe him, and I think it's true in some aspects and not others. Like mechanically, I don't think that he was robotic. I think that he was relatively fluid as a thrower, but in terms of the way that he approached the game, it was very robotic, very like if-then type quarterbacking, not very improvisational, not very creative, not very like lateral thinking, right? And Kevin O'Connell, specifically when talking about Kirk Cousins, was like, yeah, sometimes you just got to play football. You just got to turn that off, man. And that's actually kind of what he was talking about when he talks about the quiet mind stuff. I don't know if he said it recently, so I don't know why this question came up, but he did say it a couple of times, especially his first year as a coach, when he talked about Kirk Cousins. And it was like, you like, don't press, but, kind of you've played enough football that you kind of know what stuff is supposed to look like. And if it's supposed to be there and the textbook tells you it's not there, but you feel like it is, like, trust yourself kind of stuff. And I do think that he got him to be less of a conscious thinker and more of a subconscious thinker, which was huge for his development. So I'm going to say Kirk Cousins.
Next question is from Calavelon Kwai, who asks, for a Reef's strength of schedule corner, it seemed like our schedule was a bit top-heavy in terms of difficult games early. Now that we've learned a little more about each team, should I still feel this way?
I don't see, like, why not. Like, the Vikings might be better than we thought, but the schedule still seems tough, right? Like, I don't think we're coming away from that 49ers game thinking the 49ers are secretly frauds, right? So I do think the 49ers are still good. The Packers, I don't know yet. We'll see. You can't really. Is Jordan Love going to be healthy for that game? That, I think, is going to be a pretty critical question, I suppose. If it's the Malik Willis Packers, we'll see this week if there's something more than just handing the ball off to Josh Jacobs 80 times, or Jaden Reed a couple of times, I guess. But yeah, that I don't know. The Texans are still on the schedule, still a difficult matchup. The Jets are on the schedule. That looks like a difficult matchup. The Lions are on the schedule. That looks like a difficult matchup. Now the Rams and the Colts, that is a little bit different. So, maybe if we had included the Rams and potentially the Colts as some of those early season difficulties, then yeah, you could probably ratchet down the expectation for the Rams, depending on who the quarterback is for the Packers, ratchet down the expectation for the Packers. I still want to see a little bit more from the Colts before I kind of figure out who I think they are. But yeah, maybe the Jaguars, a lot of people thought could have been good. I don't know if I was completely there. But yeah, I think there's a slight adjustment, but honestly, the teams that people were kind of most concerned about, still a pretty good reason to be concerned about, I guess.
Let's go to Corey Rug, who asks, should the Giants consider James as interim GM? He may not know a lot about managing an NFL team, but he does know if you don't roster a kicker, you will lose your game.
Yeah, so
Facts.
For people who don't know, Graham Gano got injured during warmups. I know this because I rostered him, which doesn't violate the Hell League rules, by the way.
It does not.
And so their punter, Jamie Gillen, the Scottish Hammer, was the kicker for that game.
And they knew that there was a potential injury beforehand. They knew this was possible.
Yeah. So good work, Giants. Kind of wish I knew that before I picked up Graham Gano, but that's part of the Hell League, I guess. I don't know that James would be any worse than the current general manager situation with the Giants.
I would not have let Saquon walk. I will say that is something I would not have let happen. But yeah, and as an aside, Arif, I don't know if you got any of the emails I sent out this week about teams getting their wins vacated. But I had 4 games that had to have their points changed because people had kickers on their bench. So I sent out emails to everyone in these leagues that these games happened in saying, please point and laugh at this person who now has 0 points.
The only email because I only get the emails that you receive, not the ones that you send, unless it's obviously to the leagues I'm in.
Right.
And so I know that someone ratted someone else out, which, by the way, we encourage.
Yes.
For the purposes of the Hell League.
Save me the trouble.
But, I didn't see any, so I probably wasn't in any of the leagues where this happened. There's 9 leagues, by the way.
Yeah,
so
there's 9 Hell Leagues in order to have all of you crazy people in this. So
yeah,
there's a bit of a time sacrifice in order to make sure that all the rules are being followed, and I absolutely encourage snitching. So just as an aside, Todd asks, we don't seem to be turning the ball over as much this last year, or over as much as we did last year, rather. At this time last year, we were -6, and this year we are at 0. Any thoughts?
I think part of it is that we weren't producing turnovers because this is just a takeaway turnover differential. So I don't know that is like the best way to determine how often the Vikings are turning the ball over versus last year. But I will say that I want to say it was because the first 3 weeks are like a separate season, and I can't separate out the individual games in my head. But I do remember Cousins throwing 2 turnover-worthy plays, and I think, or throwing 1 turnover-worthy play and having 1 fumble, and he ended up with 2 interceptions because they kept on bouncing off the receiver's hands in the end zone. And so, or not just in the end zone, but just like generally. And so some of the turnovers were like kind of fluky. I don't know. The Vikings generated some turnovers to make up for the turnovers that or generated some takeaways to make up for the turnovers that they committed. I don't know that there's anything that we can take away from these first couple of games because Sam Darnold is still taking some chances. Those chances are still resulting in turnovers, whether they're fumbles or picks, right? We have seen some instances where the Vikings have been a little loose with the ball. We've also seen instances where the Vikings have taken away the ball. I don't think that they're lucky or unlucky. If they were lucky, for example, they probably would have recovered the muffed punt and stuff like that. But honestly, I don't think there's much to say about the turnover differential except every time the Vikings are even or better in turnover differential, you will see a Vikings beat reporter tweet out Kevin O'Connell's record for when the Vikings are even or better in the turnover differential statistic at the end of the game, which, by the way, if you didn't know, is undefeated. I've seen this statistic so many times now.
Next question is going to be from Tim Rizzo, who asks, there's something I've been struggling with the last few years, and I wanted your thoughts on. What do you think of the current NFL product? Personally, outside of watching the Vikings, I can't stand watching the current iteration of the sport. The new kickoff rule feels like a temporary silly gimmick. Officiating continues to be terrible. Most of the analysts and broadcasters add nothing to the game, and the protection of the quarterback/offensive players has swayed way too heavily to one side.
I think that some of these are pretty fair concerns. I will say, I like the new kickoff. I like that they're trying to invite high volatility kickoff plays without inviting injuries. It's seemingly working. I know a lot of people are talking about how the new kickoff rule actually isn't working. Everyone's kicking touchbacks. It's not true. Return rate is up and more teams are experimenting with additional ways to generate advantages. And there's some pretty cool things that some teams are doing. And I think we'll see more as the year goes on of teams attempting to pin their opponents and then and those opponents counter responding. So I think we'll see the return rate go up, not down, and it's already up versus last year. So I don't have an issue with it. It does seem gimmicky, but I appreciate that they have kept the return in the game in some way because the other option was essentially eliminating it. So I'm fine with that. As for the rest of the stuff, I do have issues, right? I do have issues with the overprotection of the offense, the Aaron Rodgers rule, even the Tom Brady rule a little bit, which is not the tuck rule, but rather the going low on quarterbacks. Like, I kind of hate that, but I especially hate the Aaron Rodgers rule of the body weight. That all sucks. I would super love it if quarterbacks were also exposed to the risk that all the other football players are. And I like the idea of rewarding pass rushers by allowing them to hit the dude. That's their job. It's to hit the dude. So there are issues I have. And the NFL product these past 2 weeks hasn't been as good as it was last year or the year before. But this is tough because my primary issue is that this is my job. And so, it's tough to maintain passion watching football and enjoying football when it's also your job. The piece that I wrote at the 1 year anniversary of the Substack kind of goes into like losing passion and stuff like that and regaining the passion. And I've rediscovered it. I'm not writing the way that I used to write, and that's really helping me a lot. But that's more about the combination of watching and writing. I'm re-entering my joy of watching football is what's happening. And so I'm just moving in a different direction on this. These are issues I have on a like 10,000 foot level. I'm enjoying kind of like the weird or funny aspects of football more. I enjoy it when I see something new. I enjoy it when players that you didn't realize were good suddenly perform pretty well consistently. I enjoy asking questions like, is this sustainable and stuff like that. So, I do engage with it a lot differently than a lot of people do because of the requirements of my job. So it's tough to answer this question at the same level that you're asking it. But yeah, those are issues to me. They're not like deal breakers or anything like that. I wish they could solve them. It's not something that's going to sap too much enjoyment out of the game, except when an official, screws something up so horribly. Man, there were some pretty bad calls on Thursday night, weren't there? But
yeah, there were a few. I don't know. I find myself in situations where, you sit there with the refs and everything, and I try to watch a fair amount of football on Sunday. There are some Sundays I can't force myself to watch anything other than the Vikings. I'll try. I'll watch the YouTube clips or whatever, but I can't just force myself to do it. But for the most part, I try, and I do find myself, or I think I've over the last year or two, I've spent more time kind of like watching rookies and like trying to see what makes watching them try to make that like next step. Is you sit there and watch them like, okay, I don't pay a ton of attention to college football. I'm actually trying to fix that this year, but I don't watch a ton of college football, so I don't have as much of like a baseline. But you see all of this like raw talent out there, and then you see, oh, he's got an extra move on that. Oh, he's a running back. He's working on his footing, which is also why Caleb Williams' feat for game 1 was so damn hilarious to me. It's like, that is, we watch quarterback play all the time, and we watch quarterbacks drop back all the time, like 30 times a game at least.
Mm-hmm.
And watching his dance when he was just all arm and no body, no hips, no back, nothing, just all arm, and he's like in the air as he's doing it. It's like, oh my God, this is terrible. Where's the popcorn? I need more. Like I just need to get more of this into me.
Yeah, what's great though is that like you get the full spectrum of that this year, because Bryce Young was a much worse version of that, and it circled back around from, oh, this is terrible, I'm going to watch it, it's funny, to, oh, this is terrible, someone save that child. I am so concerned about this guy because his footwork was he's jumping, right? He's like always on his toes. He's not generating any power. He's not even stepping through his throws, right? And it's like you're getting a lot of that with Caleb, but with Caleb Williams, it's like funny, right? And that was more the first week than the second week. But it was like funny because you didn't feel like bad for him. I feel like bad for Bryce Young.
Caleb Williams took a hell of a lot of sacks, and
CJ Stroud
pointed it out. Like, dude, you can't keep taking all these sacks. Like, I
don't think you get it. These guys are faster than you now. They weren't faster than you in college. They're faster than you now.
By week 8, this may stop being funny, but I was.
But until then,
until then,
yeah.
Tommy Gunn asks: is there any modern, practical, or clearly articulable reason to not allow teams to suit up and play all 53 players for games? If I'm missing the obvious rationale, I'll own that as a personal failing, but it seems so needlessly tradition for tradition's sake.
Okay, so the reason is to kind of level the playing field for teams that are more injured. So the inactive list for a team that is very injured is composed entirely of injured players, while the inactive list for a team without that obviously has a number of healthy players. And the idea is, some teams, just through no fault of their own, are just not going to have as many players available for the game. So we'll set an arbitrary limit to the number of players that you can have available for a game to even that out a little bit, because those teams can't cut those injured players, so they can't reduce their roster size or replace those players unless it's like an injured reserve situation, which most injuries do not force you to go on to injured reserve, right? So that's the idea, and I am sympathetic to it. I still hate it. I don't like it. I would rather everybody's active. I hate paying attention to inactive lists. And I think that like the only thing is I like having the knowledge of when a player is like out. So like when a starter is on the inactive list like that, I like knowing that, and the ambiguity is really annoying. So I would like, a lot of players are placed as doubtful on the injury report that end up being kind of inactive. I would like for, before the game, for there to be an out list, right? And if you're not on the out list and you don't play in the game, you're subject to the same kind of investigation for if you're an injured player that's not on the injured list during practice. So kind of the same process. So I would like that. I actually, on the 60-minute drill, which is the podcast that I'm doing with Bird Spector and Ed Zitron, we were going to do a thing on the history of gambling in the NFL. And we just kind of ran out of time, so we're going to do that next week. But it is related to this injury list thing. Anyway, that's the reason. I don't love it. I understand where it comes from. But it forces teams to do like really strange things, and it's counterproductive. And I think it reduces the quality of the game because you're in situations where teams will either play an injured quarterback because they don't have another one. That happened like quite actually with Jay Cutler in the NFC Championship game. Or teams will be in a situation where they're putting a tight end out at offensive tackle because they just ran out of offensive linemen. I remember that happened with Atlanta. And we were like, oh my God, Everson Griffin's on a sack streak. Now he's up against a tight end. This is crazy. But Atlanta just decided, okay, that's clearly a bad matchup for us. We're just going to have like 3 people blocking Everson Griffin. But like, it's like, that's bad. I don't like that. And if you didn't have the inactive list, I think that probably you could have avoided that kind of thing. So I think they should get rid of it because I think it, increases the likelihood of injury, reduces the quality of the game. But I get where it comes from.
Next question is from Magic Man, who asks, for a Reef's poltergeist corner, as we all know, Darnold is playing suspiciously good football. But is there a single logical conclusion from this fact? One of Darnold's ghosts has been succeeding in possessing him, taking over his body like a puppet, but the question remains, who is the puppeteer? Based on Darnold's play on the field, which long-dead NFL quarterback is actually leading us on this improbable win streak? I think it's fair to say we're off the rails.
we got there quickly, huh? So I think that the way that he is playing kind of reminds me of, he's not playing as well as this guy. So I think this is, this is more stylistic than anything like that. A little bit like Andrew Luck, who, as we know, is dead. I think that, obviously pre-injury, but he's taking a lot of chances. He is throwing it deep. I think Andrew Luck is the exact kind of guy that would throw a 97-yard touchdown from the inside his own end zone. The mobility is there. I guess he probably doesn't take contact as well, and he's avoiding contact a little bit better than Andrew Luck does, though, as kind of the counter. But I think that's like maybe, because it's like, oh, he's an athlete, but he's not really using it. He's just a pocket guy that will occasionally scramble. Okay, great. But when he does scramble, it's like, oh, that was 20 yards. Did you all see that? That was 20 yards. And like Andrew Luck had that. Everyone knew he was athletic because everyone went out of their way to be like, no, he's really good. He's white, but he's a really good athlete. Look, he ran a 4.6. So people like went out of their way to remind you that Andrew Luck was an athlete. So you knew that. Now we're kind of getting there with Darnold, but at least like we're getting kind of the same styles of play. So I think it's probably that. I think the ideal situation though is like if he enters the avatar state, right, and he absorbs all of the quarterbacks who have departed from the game, he'd be unstoppable, right?
I would have to think he'd be a truly terrifying person that would probably win a Super Bowl for another team.
Yeah, right. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. Nolan Kaler asked, for North Code, with ratings in decline, interesting, what rule would Arif implement to make the game more appealing? Perhaps an expansion franchise to his favorite city of London, Ontario.
I'm going to assume that this is accurate and that CFL ratings have been declining. First of all, no, London, Ontario does not deserve a team. Jesus Christ. Get it together, man.
But they have so many poutine trucks that could go out and feed the people tailgating.
Here's the thing about Canada. You can find poutine anywhere. I love poutine. You can find poutine anywhere. We don't got to cater our markets to the poutine market. It exists everywhere. Canada's saving grace. But I mean, you already have the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Hamilton's close enough. You don't need a game, and Toronto, obviously. You don't need a London team. That's crazy. In fact, an expansion team for CFL just sounds bad in general. Probably modify the import rule to allow more Americans to play, I suppose, or technically more imports to play. They could be from anywhere, but they're Americans. You'll kind of crush the kind of spirit of engaging with Canadian football. But if ratings are down, increase the quality of play. Put some more Americans on the roster. Maybe we could have, like, instead of just American quarterbacks and receivers, American running backs, American cornerbacks. Like, there are some options here. So, that's probably the way to do it.
Let's go to football's misandrous niche, who asks, I don't know. Okay, so before we begin the next couple questions, this exploded somehow in the Discord. I did nothing to stoke this fire. Dusty was in the middle of this for some reason. These are
once you hear the question, you'll understand why it was Dusty who clearly started all of this.
Yeah, let's go with that. The question is, question for a Reef's Star Trek corner: which traditional galactic rival / enemy of the Federation do the Packers and the Saints assume? The Packers' brainless glory lust, despite an ongoing decline, would seem to imply the Klingon Empire during the late Deep Space Nine seasons. The Saints, to me, really compare to the scheming Romulans who always try to circumvent the rules, much like the Saints did in 2009. What are your thoughts?
Man, I actually really like this because my first thought for the Saints was the Cardassians, right? But I think the Romulans kind of fit a little bit better, just because like the Cardassians would like manipulate you and be sly, but they wouldn't honestly violate agreements so much as manipulate. I mean, they did eventually declare war, so there's always a limit to that. But the Romulans would like actively, screw around with like the neutral zone and stuff like that. So that one, I guess I do like that one. I think that one fits. If there's like there's not like a good Vulcan equivalent to the Romulans because that dynamic is always interesting. I don't think there's an NFL team that could have a Vulcan Romulan dynamic though. Maybe the Ravens and the Browns, one splits off from the other, but I don't think that works for this particular question. So the Romulans is pretty good. The Klingon Empire is great. That's a fantastic one. I think probably the Bengals of the Ferengi, right? Penny pinchers, miserly, punching way below their weight, generally speaking, kind of distasteful in general. But, by the end of it, you're kind of cheering for some of them, right? Like I love Joe Burrow, right? So you could do that. You kind of already hashed this one out. I don't know that I've got much to disagree with on this one.
Next question is a follow-up. Aaron from South Dakota asks, follow-up for the Star Trek corner, which player or coach would be the Vikings' Khan? Aaron Rodgers, Sean Payton, Drew Pearson, someone else?
Well, I mean, if we wanted to do kind of the historical, like, Drew Pearson's like pretty good, especially because we're constantly reminded of the play name, the Hail Mary. It's just in the vernacular right now, but that is the original Hail Mary. And it was underhanded because he did push off, right? Which is exactly how, the plot of that movie plays out. And it is a historical reference, right? Like this is, I guess we saw a reboot, but like this is a reference to the Shatner era Star Trek. And so it's like decades old, just like the Hail Mary. So I think that one fits really well. I don't know that there are like maybe Len Dawson, but I don't know that there are like villains in the same way. Like there are hurdles that would have been difficult to overcome. The Vikings had rivals, like the 49ers rivalry was pretty bad, especially because the Vikings kept losing it. But I do like the Drew Pearson, to Khan thing. If we wanted a more contemporary one, I don't think it'd be Aaron Rodgers. The Vikings have actually been generally quite successful against him. Same with Sean Payton, honestly. Like, yeah, the biggest moment, the NFC Championship game 2009, that was a failure, but there was like a lot of wins, a lot of W's over L's, I think, by the end of that. So I don't know that that's a good one. Not that, eventually they didn't prevail over Khan, but yeah, I think it has to be Drew Pearson.
Let's go to Logan Bolsharif, who asks, question for a Reef. Who do you hate more, people who watch anime or people who watch Star Trek?
I asked before the show, do I have a Star Trek bit? And James is pretty sure I don't. And he would know better than I would. So,
yeah.
Why would I hate people who watch Star Trek? My brother watches. He's a huge Star Trek guy. That's kind of why I know anything about Star Trek, because I was a little bit of a Star Wars guy. I'm going to admit I lost that battle. Jesus. Not that the current iteration of Star Trek is great either. So it's not like a huge L. It's a small one. But Jesus. I don't know. It's fine. I like people who watch Star Trek. I despise people who watch anime. I think that's pretty clear.
I never got into Deep Space Nine, but I really, really enjoyed.
It's good, man. It's good.
I've heard. I just can't do it. I got into
it's less episodic. TNG is like very, pop an episode in, watch it friendly, and I love TNG. In fact, I think I still prefer TNG to DS9. I know a ton of people prefer DS9. I totally get it. DS9 is fantastic in a lot of ways. I think I just prefer TNG.
Well, next question is also from Logan Bolsharif, who asks, question for James's Arif Corner. You've known Arif for a long time, and many in the industry recognize that you created him, and he ditched you as soon as he was able. It's quite sad.
How did I ditch you? What in the world?
Maybe to London, I don't know. Anyways, if someone were to dig up dirt on Arif, say on random forums with age restrictions and NSFW tags...
Oh, it's a Mark Robinson question.
What phrases does Arif use the most that we could use to confirm if his aliased comments were his? The word dope. Word dope in respond to something would definitely that as a response to something.
Is that unique?
Yes.
Like, I know I use it all the time. I'm not objecting to that part of it, but like,
this
you don't know anyone else that uses it all the time?
This is not a judgment on it. That is an Arifism. That is a response to something. That would be how I do.
I was just totally expecting something. Like, I'm not offended by you using that. It's just, I totally expected like a different set of like me saying the word primarily a lot or whatever, right?
I mean, there's certain stat head stuff that I would expect, but realistically, that would be that's your poker tell. That's
because I don't even notice when that's fair. Okay,
yeah. That would be the one, and I'm confident that if we if we saw that with an email address that appeared in an Ashley Madison thing, like that would be it. You're like, Arif wasn't even married. The tweet earlier online, somebody said that my dad wasn't even married when he was in it. He was just in it for the love of the game. Like that's Arif at that point.
That's so good, man. Someone is going to look up the Ashley Madison link just to see if I'm on it now because of you, James.
Well, here we are.
Go for it.
Ingram's left arm asks, for Arif's child rearing and mathematics corner, we all know James's diet for mental clarity while child rearing. I have some Aquafina and honey bunches of oats ready to go. However, does the diet change with twins to how does the diet change with twins to raise and a new dad who's over 40? Do I add a formula? Do I switch to Ensure? Help.
Okay, so it sounds like this is the diet for the father, right? Not for the kids.
Correct.
Yeah. Otherwise, I was like, yeah, formula, great. No, I think you just got to switch from Honey Bunches of Oats to Cheerios. Like you're playing double duty. You got to respect yourself a little bit more now. You got to step up your game.
Was it?
Get to the real stuff.
I'm trying to remember what cereal it was that I added water to when I was that exhausted. I don't think it was Honey Nut Cheerios, but it seems likely. It was either that or the only cereal I ever eat is like Honey Nut Cheerios or like the like raisin flake or like I think that's it would have to be that. I think it would have to be Honey Nut Cheerios.
Yeah, so go to Honey Nut Cheerios, and then for the water, I mean, Aquafina is whatever. That's fine. I think
you probably want that smart water, that electrolyte stuff. I feel like that would help with raising twins.
The smart water is fine. It's not very cost effective as far as waters go. I would go with Polish Spring, which is both higher quality than Aquafina and tastes better and cheaper, right? Like it's Polish Spring is a goated water bottle brand. I cannot believe they still sell for 99 cents. So I would go with that, but smart water does have electrolytes, and that's what dads crave.
Oh, I was going to say that's what plants crave too, but yeah, that's absolutely. Damian Bolsharif asks, for James's relationship corner, going to be seeing an ex this weekend. I wanted to get your advice on what approach to use. 1, open hostility. 2, passive indifference. 3, showering new love with as much affection and attention as possible. And which option do you feel like will annoy Diggs the most? Look, showering new love with as much affection as humanly possible is always good in these sorts of situations. Get it to the point where they feel uncomfortable and they have to leave. Always good. You feel like a winner. I'm gonna say 3, but 2 really is good.
I mean, 2 is like the textbook approach, right? Like 2 is how they teach it to you. Like that's the game you're supposed to play. 3, I think is like for good risk takers. You got to know yourself if you're doing 3. You got to understand what your limits are. You got to do risk reward correctly. when you have gunslingers, sometimes, you're 2009 Favre, sometimes you're any year Jameis Winston. Taking chances requires you to have a good understanding of what you can accomplish. So I would stick with 2 generally, but 3 is a pretty fun time if you can pull it off without getting invested.
Yeah.
If you get invested, you're in a bad spot. 1 is if you're messy and young, I think, actually.
Next question is from Arifluenza, who asks, for Arif's veterinary corner. This is basically a term you coined here. So, I just missed my dog's annual wellness exam, incurring a missed appointment fee and a need to reschedule. The next opening isn't until Halloween. So what would be the funniest costume to dress up my German Shepherd-ish dog in for her new appointment?
So James and I both independently came up with answers that are terrifying to veterinarians. Mine is a private equity firm.
I like that. That's good. I don't think it's scary enough. I think it has to be a Google review. I think a 1-star angry Google review is just enough to get him over the edge.
And one that, because you're going to write it out for the costume. One where you're clearly in the wrong, but you're still leaving 1 star.
Exactly. Wouldn't let me bring in the other 7 dogs I have, but I wasn't going to leave them in the house alone.
Despite having scheduled an appointment for my 1 dog.
That floor already had poop on it. I don't see why they're blaming my dog for it.
Dogs poop. Get over it. You'd think a veterinary clinic would know that.
Yeah. How dare you?
1 star.
Yeah. Final question is from Room Bull Sharif, who asks, it was said in last week's 49ers interview, Brock Purdy plays like Freebird could start playing at any second when he quarterbacks. For other Vikings quarterbacks throughout time, what song is ready to start when they are playing? Especially, what song is Josh Freeman?
So we started pondering this, and then James just took all of it. I mean, it's a DJ, of course he's got this, but James killed this one. So yeah.
All right. I'm gonna save the top one for last. T-Jack, Tavares Jackson is Jump by Criss Cross.
Perfect.
Case Cookus, My Name Is by Eminem. Christian Ponder, The World Has Turned and Left Me Here. That seems appropriately moody for that. Yeah. Teddy Bridgewater, we had a debate, decided on the stanky leg. Kirk Cousins, it's Shooting Fish in a Barrel. It's Higher by Creed. There's no debate here. Josh Freeman is obviously going to be Benny Hill, the Benny Hill theme. That seems to work out the best. And Brett Favre is Been Caught Stealing by Jane's Addiction. So that is where we're at. I will take no questions. And with that, we are done with this episode of Norse Code. Reef, what do you have to plug? It's not the Jane's Addiction reunion tour anymore. So what do you got to plug?
And Blink's reunion tour is already well over. So third reunion, it doesn't matter. Linkin Park's reunion tour is coming, or not reunion. I'm still here. Linkin Park tour. So don't go to those. Just go to wideleft.football. I got Luke Braun to publish a piece, I guess. I don't know. It's about Mount Fuji or something. Anyway, Pat Jones is in it. You should check it out. And I've got the new podcast, 60 Minute Drill. We reviewed week 2. We talked about pizza again. And we talked about the NFC West, because everyone's always forcing me to talk about the Seahawks. That's fun. Next week's episode is going to be about gambling. I already mentioned that. I had a lot of fun editing Luke's article, which I obviously hate to admit. But in this case, it's my fault because I gave him the idea behind the vehicle. He took it home. He killed it. But yeah, it's a long piece about Pat Jones, I guess.
I love, in case you haven't seen it, the Reddit comments about the post are phenomenal.
Oh my gosh.
They are all over the place. They're quite good, so check that out. Well, that is it for this episode of Norse Code. We will be back with a review of hopefully a win over the Texans in a few days. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening, And sorry, I just keep looking at been caught stealing for Favre.
That's so good.
Oh boy. And we'll see you next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of... and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I'm your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.